Welcome to the third Winter 2011 ICT Educator Conference. My name is Pierre Thierry. I'm the Principal Investigator of the MPIC Center here in City College of San Francisco. And I want to acknowledge the fact that we have been teaming with the National ICT Center, which is centered at Springfield Technical Community College, and want to recognize Principal Investigator here. This year we have two more centers who are co-sponsoring the Boston Area Advanced Technology Education Connection Center, and Deborah Boisvert is in the audience here, and also the Marin Valley College Center for System Security and Information Assurance, and I think Eric Spenger, the PI, is also here in the audience. It's my pleasure to have Dr. Griffin, who is our Chancellor, to give you the welcoming remarks on behalf of City College of San Francisco.
Good morning. So I'm very pleased that you're all here today at this beautiful setting. Microsoft has been so generous to provide to us for this conference, third annual. We're very, very proud of MPIC. It's one of two National Science Foundation centers that we have, and we're very excited about it. Actually, a little bit more excited about the San Francisco Giants. You'll be here, and I'm sure we'll see you next year, and hopefully we can say at that time San Francisco Giants have become world champions again. But San Francisco has been thinking a lot lately about its future and where it's headed. And one of the things that I think all of us are convinced of 100% is that technology, communication, workforce, and the future of our young people as they develop is on our minds probably all the time. Because when we get down to the bottom of it, and what we're looking at here as far as what we're doing as far as industry or community colleges or other colleges and universities, it's about providing a path forward for students so that they can have a good life as we've had in this country, which to some extent has been threatened a little bit by the recession. And so I see what you're doing and your collaboration and working together is really an effort to improve that pathway and make it possible for young people to see something that's really that they can connect to. And I still believe 100% that technology is going to help us tremendously in this society. And that for young people looking for work, that if they get a start with technology, they have a chance to continue to develop and advance in terms of their careers. I understand that represented here are a lot of our partners from industry. I just want to shout out a little bit to them. Microsoft, of course, is here, but also IBM, Cisco, Apple, Juniper, Adobe, Oracle, and so forth. And I probably have missed some of the industry people who are here. I understand that there's more than 225 all told educators and people from industry here, so I want to thank all of you for coming today. And I know for a fact that you're going to have a very, very enjoyable time in San Francisco. If you don't have an enjoyable time in San Francisco, then you're not doing something right. So don't spend all of your time here at the conference and not enjoy San Francisco. One of the things you're going to be disappointed about, because I am as well, is that we don't seem to have fog anymore. I've been searching for fog. I mean, when I first got here 30 or 40 years ago, it was like thick, thick fog everywhere. And now I don't know where you go to find fog. It just doesn't seem to. Where you go?
England.
Yeah, okay. All right, go fog. Okay, so what we've noticed in terms of the recession and the downturn in the recession is that one of the bright spots was, ICT. This has been one of the bright spots. Instead of it actually fading as much as we might have thought it would fade, it's actually been pretty substantial. And all the projections that I've seen are pointing to the fact that as we come out of the recession more and more, I know we're supposed to be out of the recession, but we're not. But as we come out of it more and more, ICT is going to be really the leader in terms of being a really robust growth, probably 4 or 5% a year on year in terms of growth at least. So it's a very, very positive indicator. When we talk to our students about the challenges of education now, most of them are more focused on, as you can imagine, where will I get work? Where will I get jobs? How will I be able to live? And so I keep telling them that as dismal as it may appear, you do have to focus on education, because the education is the single thing that I can point to without any doubt that's going to lead people out of the condition that they're in. Education is the last, I almost said the last free lunch in our society, but I guess it's not free anymore. But it's something that you can tell any kid, no matter what their background or situation, that if they get on this pathway, it can lead to something very healthy. And what I'm really proud of lately is that large corporations are beginning to understand that and help out. We just got at City College a $3 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to help in terms of making sure that our K-12 and our community college are in sync. And also, it was given to the City and County of San Francisco. The City and County of San Francisco to have its efforts, and we can all be pushing in the same direction to achieve the same goals. And I think that's what you're doing here as well. You're saying, let's coordinate our efforts across a large geographical area. Let's work together with all of our partners, and let's make sure that we do something in a strategic, very, very carefully thought out way that's going to get us to where we want to go. And so it's this kind of leadership on your part that's going to make a difference for us as the future. So thank you very much for coming today, and appreciate being here to talk with you.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin, and welcome everybody. I'm James Jones from the Mid-Pacific ICT Center.
Thank you.
Okay. In the information and knowledge economies of the 21st century, we increasingly depend on information and communications technologies. It's how students get their assignments and do their research and complete their work and share their credentials with potential employers. It's increasingly how workers get their work done on their job and interact with human resources systems and other systems within organizations and enterprises. It's how organizations get the productivity that allows them to be competitive. And it's increasingly how people interact in society, learn about government services, buy and sell goods. But it's a nutty field. It's really, really chaotic. It's confusing. There's extraordinary complexity. There's mixed messages. There's divergence of technology. There's convergence of technology. It's just absolutely insane. People ask me what I do, and I say, computer stuff. And already their eyes are rolling back in their head, and they're just unable to grope with it. There's something that I call the Tower of Babel effect in information and communications technologies, and that is people think that we're communicating, that we're using the same language and mean the same things, but frequently we're not. Everybody's had to create their own mental maps of the space and what these terms mean and what's important and what's not important. And so we have this series of conversations taking place in which people mean completely different things. And so part of what we're trying to do is use language in the same way so that we all understand this field in a similar way. One of the great trends that's been recognized in the U.S. In the last decade or so is this trend of convergence. What was previously separate devices is increasingly fewer devices. What was previously multiple networks, at least voice, video, and data, is increasingly one converged network. And we use this term convergence in the United States, but in much of the rest of the world, they just call it all information and communications technologies. It doesn't really matter what it is. ICT is this umbrella term. It's this thing, whatever it is, that's what we're talking about. At some point, you need an umbrella, a bucket, big bucket that just says, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So it's anything related to computers and software and networking, telecommunications, internet, programming, information systems. And again, this term is used widely in the rest of the world by the United Nations, the European Union, International Telecommunications Union, Australia, Canada, the World Bank, Africa. Pretty much anywhere you go that requires a passport, they use this term. We might as well line up on it as well. So think of it as a superset term. And within it, there are all these other fields and terms. Hardware doesn't do a whole lot without software. And software certainly doesn't make sense without hardware. Networking is impossible without hardware and software. The internet wouldn't exist without any of those things. So just because we use the term ICT to mean, yeah, all this stuff, that doesn't mean that networking goes away as a term or programming goes away as a term. Those things continue to exist. But at the level of policy planning or educational system design, it makes sense to think about these things together and not just the isolated subfields. So again, MPICT and the National ICT Center, our partner in this event, are both recognizing this term. We think we should all line up. If we're in a global economy, let's all use the same term. And we're both funded by the National Science Foundation, the Advanced Technological Education Group, which is focused on community colleges. It's really about the technician workforce, or I prefer applied technology, people who touch gear, people who go out in the real world and do real things with real technology to make a real difference. Somebody wants control of my desktop. I'm going to say no. So this winter conference, third time we've done it, is about improving ICT education in challenging times. We've got 4 of these ATE centers who've come together, MPICT and the National ICT Center, BayTech, which is like an MPICT, but in the Boston area, a regional center focused in the ICT arena, and CASIA, which is now a national resource center in the security area. And all of these groups can help all of us in ICT education. So challenging times. There's plenty of concern out there about our macro environments. Whoever they are, they're doing a terrible job with government and educational funding, and there's all sorts of worry and distress that we're all experiencing about, is my job secure, and are the students being served, and is my local economy going to make it? Are my friends going to be okay? It's dark times. But let me tell you something that we've discovered recently that is a little bit refreshing. We did a study that was completed this summer on information and communications technologies in California. And it's the first time really that anybody's researched ICT as this catch-all term in California. This term is not widely used in the US. We have other traditional terms. So we wanted to take a good look at it. So how big and important are ICT industries in California? How big and important is ICT employment in California? And what do employers have to say about this? Here's just a few of the findings. ICT industries. It's about 4% of all companies in California, 46,000 companies. It's 6% of private sector wages in California. 4% of the California workforce. It's about 1 million workers in California. And then when you look at wages, it's 12% of private sector wages. Second among industries in California in wages paid. Wages are twice the state average, and there's huge growth anticipated. So this is kind of intuitive. Yeah, ICT industries are big and important for California, but here's a way of quantifying that for the first time. It's not just hearsay or anecdote. And here's an example of why that's important. If you look down there at that blue area, that blue arrow, the previous categorizations that existed at the 2-digit NAICS code level, information was the closest thing to ICT that existed at that time. But information includes a bunch of other stuff, like newspapers. And newspapers are tailing off. They're not doing real well. They're laying off a whole bunch of people. So that makes it look like information technologies are not doing well either. In fact, information technologies are doing extremely well. And if you look at ICT and you take out the non-ICT stuff, it's really the second industry in the state in terms of wages paid. So being able to aggregate all of this umbrella term stuff and look at once, you realize, hey, this is a lot bigger and more important than people have acknowledged so far. But clearly not everybody working in an ICT industry or company is doing ICT related stuff. They have accountants, they have guys taking care of the grounds, they have other things. And lots of people work in ICT roles outside of ICT industries. It's pervasive, it's everywhere, it's in every industry. So we wanted to look at ICT employment regardless of where it exists. And turns out in the United States, it's about 1 in 20 jobs, 7.6 million workers in 2008. Strong growth anticipated. 1 million new positions, 275,000 annual new and replacement jobs. And in California, same thing, 1 in 20 jobs. 5% of all jobs, twice the hourly wage. So ICT employment is big and important. It's pervasive. It's out there. It's got great prospects. So then we went out and talked to companies. We talked to more than 600 California companies because we wanted to get something statistically significant. 80% of firms in California either agree or strongly agree that ICT is important to the productivity of their organization. And this isn't just, the way the numbers play out. It's true for all different geographies and all different sizes of company. It's more true for larger companies, but it's true for all companies. So our survey showed that California companies expect about 3.8% overall employment growth over the next 2 years. That's about what you see in other surveys. But companies providing ICT goods or services expect 8.5% employment growth over the next 2 years. And those who don't expect employment to shrink by 0.4%. So ICT industries are doing well relative to other industries. Of those companies who expect 8.5% overall employment growth, they expect 11.2% growth for their ICT workforce. So they need more people in these roles than they need people in other roles. For non-ICT companies who expect to actually lose a little bit of employment, They still expect 3.7% growth in their ICT workforce. So these roles are increasingly important. That's where the jobs are over the next 2 years. Interestingly, especially in this difficult economic climate, half of firms report difficulty recruiting employees with appropriate ICT skills. That's amazing. You know, look at the unemployment we have right now. People can't find the talent. And almost half of California firms do not require a bachelor's degree for at least half their ICT workforce. So it's dark and gloomy and miserable out there, and we can be upset about all sorts of macro things. But within our world, ICT, there's a lot of opportunity. Really, it's a rosy period, and things haven't changed. We're still teaching classes. There's still students in the classes. We have an opportunity to impact them and help them make their lives better, develop knowledge and skill sets that will serve them well. So let's grab a hold of that. And this event is about being smarter in how we do that. Let's apply a little bit of leverage. So everybody in this room does something really well. And nobody in this room can do everything well because we don't have enough time or resources available. So let's learn from each other. Let's talk about the things that we do really well, and listen to others talk about things that they do really well. So if everybody can just look in their package at some point at the agenda that's there, I think it's absolutely extraordinary. There's just amazing stuff in here. Those sessions that are shaded orange are presentations by business and industry people who care about ICT education. These are resources and practices that they'd like to share to improve ICT education. Those shaded green are by educators. Here's stuff we're doing, practices, curriculum that are successful. Let's learn from those. And then tomorrow, there's a 4-session track on improving diversity in ICT education. So all great stuff, and thank you to all of you who are presenters at this event. We are going to be making available remotely through the internet most of these sessions, and we'll be recording these for review later. That expands the impact of this event beyond those who can be here in the room. And we're partnering for that with CCC Confer. Blaine and Michelle, are you still here? There they are, over by the door. Thanks, guys. Fabulous tool. It has value-added services, but it's based on the Illuminate platform. We have people online right now listening to us, and if you're a presenter, there will be a facilitator in your room. Just give them your slides or check in with them, and they'll make it happen. So it's not a problem for you. Our focus is on delivering an experience to people in the room. So we're not going to be doing a lot of internet interaction with people online. There's a possibility of some technical trouble. If so, sorry about that. Please be patient. You can also use that opportunity to connect with each other, which people routinely tell us is one of the best things that they get out of this event. Is an opportunity to connect with their peers and learn from each other and serve as subject matter experts for each other. And that networking part is really important, and we want to acknowledge that. So tomorrow, or actually this evening, after the sessions are over, we're going to have a little happy hour in the Educated Palette We can't use public funds for that purpose, but thank you to Cengage Learning for helping us out with that. There's going to be some beer and wine and a chance to sort of hang out with each other informally. And we hope that everyone will be able to do that with us. We're fortunate that we've got some common ground that makes networking easier, and that is ultimately everybody in this agrees ICT is important. This is strategically good for our society because these are enabling technologies that make everybody more efficient. And one of the findings from our report was that more than half of businesses in California didn't know whether community colleges are doing a good job developing the ICT workforce. So that's kind of an opportunity for us. And for those of you from business and industry here in the room, I'd like to just point out the extraordinary diversity of the community college role. It's anything from sharp students in high school who want to gain entry to the field. They can take classes at community colleges. For those with a high school diploma or GED, community college is frequently a place they go for an initial knowledge and skill set that allows them to find employment. The community college is also a very affordable transfer pathway to four-year colleges and universities for advanced degrees. But a lot of working professionals and graduates of higher education come back to community college because they have to keep up with these rapidly advancing technologies. Or they get that advanced degree and they find they still don't have any skills that employers are willing to pay for. So community colleges have an extraordinary strategic role in ICT education. Okay, so remember the Tower of Babel effect? One of the things that we're trying to do is to develop a common language, a consistent way of talking about opportunities in the ICT field. And we started grappling with this pyramid here, which is simple 3 layers of who does what in the ICT world. But at the base of that is ICT users. And today that's pretty much everybody. This is the domain of digital literacy or ICT literacy, user competency. And community colleges have a role in developing those competencies for everybody, whether they're pursuing an ICT-related career or not. Doesn't matter who you are or what you do, you need this stuff. And the next level up, which is the fuzzy line in there, is sort of the entry-level employment of those people who understand the ICT technologies well enough to help other users. So there's help desk kinds of roles. Above that is what we're calling ICT enablers. These are the applied technologists, the technicians, the people who touch gear, who go out into the real world and install and support mature technologies. This is really the focus of NSF ATE. And at the top are the wizards, the creators, the engineers who develop technology and advance the field. The fuzzy line between those are the fact that they're not isolated all the time. They come down and interact with customers and get requirements for new products and help people install them. But that's not just limited to ICT industries. It exists in every industry. You know, financial services, where would Charles Schwab or Fidelity Investments be without ICT right now? Healthcare. ICT is extremely important in that. So that pyramid exists in every industry. And so there's a modification of this ICT framework that we're still experimenting with that looks like this. So within every organization there is this pyramid, but within each industry there's also some unique stuff. There's car mechanic today can't fix cars without knowing something about computers. So they're the tools that are used in that trade or that industry. So just sharing that framework with you. We're going to be pretty ruthless about starting and stopping on time today. So just expect that if you're a presenter. And I'm going to kick me off the stage here. But thank you, everyone, for coming today. There is an evaluation package in your folder. Please complete that. It's really about providing feedback that helps us do a better job with events like this in the future. And just real quick, after our keynote session, we're going to transition from this Microsoft facility down Market Street to the right on 4th Street to the City College of San Francisco downtown campus. And breakout sessions will be there for the rest of the day. So will the reception. Tomorrow morning we'll be back here for keynotes again. Grace? Okay, so now I'd like to introduce Dr. Jim Spohrer, Director of IBM University Programs Worldwide from IBM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's a great opportunity to speak to you all. I really want to thank James Jones, Christopher Wu, and Vakar Hassan for telling me about this group and getting me a copy of that environment evaluation report, which I read through and thought was great. And I'll reinforce a couple of the messages you had because I picked them out as well as significant. I think there's no doubt, certainly in anybody's mind in this room, that ICT is incredibly important, not just to the ICT industries, not just to the IBMs and Microsofts and Googles of the world, but in general it's becoming more and more important. And part of the message that I'll have today is, in fact, that the community college system is going to be a real key, even more than it is today in the future, because ICT has tremendously transformed business. You can't think of a global business today that could operate without ICT, and yet a lot of our local governments aren't taking advantage of ICT. So there's going to be a tremendous opportunity locally for ICT in government, and that'll be one of the themes in my message today. So this is the longest title I've ever had for a talk that I have given. It was designed by committee. And I kind of like it, though, so I'm going to read it. The Emerging Pervasive Network Computing Explosion and Its Tremendous Pending Impact on Society, ICT, Workforce, and Technical Education. Thank you, James. Thanks, Christopher and Vakar. So today I'm going to give some highlights from that 2010 environmental scan. Again, reinforcing some of these messages because I just thought that report was so important, and I've circulated it more and more and more. We're going to talk about the future of ICT, and I'm one of those people that I'm not comfortable talking about the future unless I've talked about the history in the past. So I've got a very brief one-slide history of ICT. And I'm also so glad to hear this ICT term. I travel all around the world. My job is working with 5,000 universities worldwide, higher education institutes worldwide for IBM. So I'm always traveling around the world, and everybody talks about ICT except here in the US. So I'm so nice to be finally at a conference here in the US talking about ICT. So thank you. But then I will talk about these trends, both the current trends and some in the future that I think are really quite revolutionary. And I don't think this is an area where I don't even think we in the ICT community are fully cognizant of what we're unleashing on the world, how transformative these technologies really are going to be. Maybe the young kids have some sense, but we don't. So there are big implications for society, the ICT workforce of the future, and technical education. And I might as well foreshadow right away. This notion of ICT workforce separate from these other areas of knowledge doesn't really exist. I mean, ICT education has been great for the IBMs and Microsofts and the Googles of the world, but increasingly that's not where the ICT people are going to be employed. And if they're just ICT, that's going to be a shrinking part of the job opportunities for them. The biggest opportunities are going to be when you combine ICT with something else. And of course, I've already foreshadowed that ICT in the public sector is going to be big, and that's going to be great for local ICT employment. And I think one of the ways we're going to address some of these challenges of educating people in the future is a concept we call T-shaped professional, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So, these numbers look familiar, but I think you should all memorize them, so go ahead and start memorizing here. So 4% of all companies, private sector companies, 4% of the workforce, but 6% of the private sector revenue. So that's significant. And then 12% of the salaries. So this is really quite significant statistics. And these 600 employers that were surveyed, there's a lot of different ICT roles in their organizations. So 86% said that end user support roles in their organizations were going to become more important or very important. 67% talked about data center support in their organization. 71% important or very important on online and internet support. Whoops, misspelling there. 58% talked about IT management, ICT management. 51% hardware and software development, and 41% marketing and sales. And I can't believe, you know, in IBM, I don't think we have a single marketing and salesperson that isn't a technical marketing and salesperson too. And I really do like this pyramid view, so I want to reinforce that. Right at the end of this report, there was something I really liked. And there wasn't much of it, but what was there was gold. And it asked these employers, how will your needs be changing in the future? And what are your suggestions for improving ICT education? And there was only about 30 or 40 items there. I pulled out the ones that I thought were most representative of what I'm hearing, and that I will talk a little bit more about later on in this talk. But one of the things that was emphasized right off the bat on how will the needs be changing is you need more employees with ICT skills because they're going to be doing more self-service. So that means all employees have to have ICT skills. So I'm sure, you know, this is the digital literacy, the ICT user part of that bottom of the pyramid. Next, they said they're going to need broader skill sets and higher skill sets. So both broader and deeper. And when you're wondering what do we mean by T-shaped, broader and deeper is the T. They're going to need continual progression and currency, lifelong learning. Technology is going to be changing so fast, the applications are going to be changing so fast, people are hopping around multiple careers. Somehow, as you're working on your ICT education in the future, you have to find a way that it's going to be more general for helping them continuously learn in the future, not just the technologies of today, but thinking about the future and what's going to prepare them for learning about the future. IT services are going to be more important. Improving ICT education, right off the top, more real-world experience. I just wrote a short letter to the editor for the Chronicle of Higher Education where I emphasized more real-world experience. More real-world experience. Capstone projects. So when you're thinking, it's not just the book learning that we're looking for in industry. If the students come and say, we had an internship or we did a capstone project with industry, that's worth a lot to us, huge amounts. So more real world experience, not just the textbooks learning, not just that they wrote the code, whatever, that they actually went out and worked on team-oriented project. More soft skills, teamwork, more focus on systems. That was really important. Several of the comments said, it's not just about this particular niche part of the ICT, it's about the system and the economic benefits that these systems are creating for society. Somehow you have to infuse that more into ICT education. Global work readiness, deeper analytic and problem-solving skills, broader teamwork and communication. So these are all things that I just pulled out of that report, but I see the need for these every day. So here's the brief history part, and I'll try to keep this really brief. But in 1945, there's some consensus that that was the first computer science department at Columbia University. Of course, it's heavily debated. Some people say it was 20 years earlier at this other place, but there's a lot of evidence, and there's a lot of pictures on the web about these early 1945 courses at Columbia. What was interesting about this first computer science department is it was a couple years before the invention of the transistor. So these computers that they were teaching with were relays and just amazingly interesting machines, state of the art, but it was before the transistor. And I put the transistor 1947 to 1945 because you had the germanium transistor invented in 1947, but the silicon transistor came along in 1954. And it wasn't until 1958 that you had the first integrated circuit, and here's a picture of it right over here. You see this? All these things looked really cool to me. 1969 was the first IMP. This is the first two nodes of the internet sending their first message. People know the story of this. They were trying to log in and it crashed on the G. And then they rebooted, fixed the software, and they were able to log in. That was 1969. 1971, the microprocessor. Intel's 4004 processor was the first one. And that's the history. So we're talking about this computer science-oriented ICT education really is only, what? It's about 65 years old or so? So our lifetime. Some of us. So older than I look. No, not quite there yet. But today, in 2010, 1/3 of the worldwide population has internet access. 1/3 of the people on the planet have internet access. And in 2010, mobile phone subscriptions hit 5 billion. Now this is because a lot of people have 2 or 3 phones in certain countries. I think Belgium has the highest percentage of mobile phones per person. So question is, when will 75% of the worldwide population have internet access on their mobile phones? This is coming. This is coming. And I want to say just a little bit more about what the significance of this mobile phone access to the internet is. A lot of you know about 10 years ago, IBM built a supercomputer to beat the world's champion in chess. Well, right now, actually, it's already happened and it'll air in February. IBM has built a supercomputer that's challenged the 2 top champions in the world in Jeopardy. And I don't know if you are familiar with the Jeopardy show, but this is, these people, all of this questions about common sense knowledge, history. Basically, the people who win Jeopardy are walking encyclopedias. But it's subtle because if you've ever watched the game, you need to, there's tricks and there's puns in the questions. There's a lot of natural language understanding and processing required to play the game. So I can't tell you what the result is. I don't know. But in February, it'll air on TV. And the significance of this is that by around 2020, these people that have mobile phones with internet access are going to basically be able to have natural language conversations with all of human knowledge for the first time in human history. Because it runs on a supercomputer today, in about 10 years it'll be running on smaller systems. And it won't just be for Jeopardy the game, it'll be medical questions you may have, agricultural questions you may have. So think about this point in history that ICT is enabling, and it'll be here within about 10 years. I actually have a pretty good track record of making predictions. I predicted in 2000 I was giving a keynote, and I pulled out my cell phone and I said, by 2010, this cell phone will have enough memory that it could record all the audio in a person's life, about 100 years of audio on the phone. People were shaking their head, no way. Well, guess what? Here it is, and it does. And by 2020, we will have systems that you can talk to that will give you the answer to all kinds of questions. How many know about Wolfram Alpha? Okay, that's going in that direction. So think about this capability that people will have and what the implications of that are. It's staggering. But let's just talk about, there's been a tremendous growth in transistors per person, and the cost is going down. Here's the big trend. The big trend is this ICT evolution means that the world is becoming instrumented, not just sensors everywhere, for seeing traffic flows, for we have projects where we're putting sensors in the ground to see how much water is leaking in the ground. Sensors, the smart meter controversy here in California. Sensors are everywhere. Even I've got a sensor. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were showing me their app that says, yeah, this keeps track of my movements, how much I'm moving every day, when I go to sleep, and he was showing me these charts of his biostatistics. So the world is becoming full of sensors, us included. It's becoming interconnected. You can access it from anywhere. And this is the hope. I still have a little bit of a question mark over this intelligence. It's clear that we can make better decisions if we have the right information. And this is where I think a lot of the future ICT work is going to be oriented around analytics, getting this information to make useful decisions in the workforce, manufacturing, supply chain, transportation, customer relationships, and smarter buildings. So the ICT evolution really, I think, can be nicely characterized in terms of these three I's. Instrumented, more sensors, interconnected, you can access it from anywhere, and intelligent. You're going to have more of the right information you need to make better decisions. So if you look at the world, and this is a couple years old, but in 2008, the GDP of the world, the gross domestic product of all the systems in the world, was $54 trillion. And these are transportation systems, communication systems, education, all the infrastructure and utilities, finance, food, government, healthcare, $54 trillion worth of value. And now you start looking at that system of systems and saying, and we surveyed 480 economists, asking them, which of these systems have the most waste and inefficiency? So you probably know a lot of gas is spent by people driving around looking for parking spaces in the cities, right? So there's inefficiency. Healthcare, government, education. So a lot of the inefficiencies in systems that these economists were talking about were the public sector. And they identified $15 trillion. Out of that $54 trillion of value being created in the world, 15 trillion of that, these economists thought had waste and inefficiency associated with it, like driving around looking for parking. Of that, 4 trillion was addressable by building smarter systems. By getting ICT more embedded into systems, you can eliminate $4 trillion worth of waste. That's $4 trillion that you could invest. Right now, we're just basically throwing it out the window because it's part of the inefficiencies of these systems. But what if instead of throwing it out the window, we could invest it in improving the systems? Huge opportunity for ICT. Here's another way of looking at it. Think about quality of life. So over the next decade or two, ICT is going to help us improve quality of life. What does that mean? What does quality of life mean? When we were researching this, I went out and I found 16 different definitions of quality of life. But they all, and there was the Economist version, there was the Forbes version, all these different versions of what is quality of life. But after looking at them all, I distilled it down into there's 13 systems that have to work for you every single day of your life, or you're going to have a bad day. And the systems break up into 3 areas. There's systems that are the flow of things. Like if you turn on the light switch and the lights don't come on, bad day. Turn on the water, no water comes out, or dirty water, bad day. Traffic jams, bad day. So there's 5 systems that deal with the flow of things: transportation, water, food, energy, ICT, communications, the bits flowing. Bad day if this doesn't work. Systems that focus on human activity and development, like this building supports our activities today. Retail, banking, healthcare, education. And then there's the governance systems. The city has to work, the state has to work, the nation has to work in terms of laws and security and all of that. And those percentages there, that's the percentage of workforce in the US in each of these systems. So that's how much labor is in there in 2009. But quality of life is more than just the quality of service that we get from these 13 systems. There have to be good quality jobs. If the quality of jobs stink in these systems, you got a bad quality of life. So you have to have good quality of service from the systems, good quality of jobs in the system, and this is very important. There's a third factor: quality of investment opportunities. If these systems don't get better and better every year, for some reason we humans want our kids to have a better life than we had. So if there isn't good quality investments, you're going to have a bad day eventually, or your kids will. So quality of service, quality of jobs, quality of investment in these 13 different systems. And I've made a habit now, whenever I go to a conference, I start, seeing how many of the papers focused on these different things. In this conference, it's mostly on ICT and education, of course. So ICT is going to help us improve quality of life if we can figure out how to apply it in all these different systems to make better decisions, to be more intelligent. I just want to emphasize that these 13 systems are really kind of important and key, and quite a bit of thought went into why these 13. And after we had cooked up these 13, the National Academy of Engineering came along with their grand challenges. And how many grand challenges are there here? 14. We had 13 systems. They had 14 grand challenges. And if you look at these grand challenges, there's like restore and improve urban infrastructure. That's our city one. Provide access to clean water. That's the water one. So very, very good mapping between what the National Academy of Engineering grand challenge problems for the future and these 13 systems that were kind of data mined out of quality of life metrics around the world. Why am I spending so much time on this? Remember, you're not just training ICT students anymore that know technical knowledge. Industry and society need them to understand how ICT is going to be applied to improve all of these different types of systems. So these are all of the different types of systems that if the students have some sense of how ICT is currently being used, how maybe it was used 20 years in the past, and how it might be used 20 years in the future, then you're beginning to create the ICT students that we need in industry and society for the future. So let's talk about the changing nature of work. I love this study. Levy and Murnane, Harvard, MIT professors, they had a clever idea one day and they executed it very well. And the name of their book is The New Division of Labor: How Computers Are Creating the Next Job Market. And basically what they did is there's new jobs being created all the time. And there's a place in the government where they actually write down the descriptions of the jobs. What do you do if you're a doctor or a nurse or a web programmer? And what they did is they came up with a coding system where they would look at the sentence and say, is this describing a routine cognitive thing or a non-routine manual? What's non-routine manual? Watching kids in a daycare, that's non-routine manual. Or routine manual, picking up boxes from this side of the room, moving them over here. Or is it talking about some sort of complex communication or expert thinking? And lo and behold, when they looked at all the job descriptions in 1969 through the years, what they discovered is that more and more of the jobs are describing expert thinking and complex communication. And more discussion about how technology is supporting people in that expert thinking and complex communication. So ICT is being embedded in all of these future jobs. And I want to focus on this. Expert thinking is depth, and complex communication is breadth. Just like in your environmental survey, they said we want them broader and deeper. Well, guess what? We call those T-shaped people. So what is the skill goal of the future? And see that many team-oriented service projects completed at the top? That's those real-world experiences, capstone projects. It's not just they know how to write a piece of code or they know how to, switch the switches on this device. It's that they've actually applied it into a real-world situation that's created value through some system. So we want students that understand how to communicate across many different disciplines, many different systems, and have real-world experience, in addition to being deep in ICT, in your case. That's a lot. And it's, we struggled with how do we visualize what they'll really have to know, what we really want them to know. So we struggled with this. We talked to a lot of people, and we came up with prepare your eyes and brains for this one because it's hard. This. So it's really quite simple. It's called the Systems Disciplines Matrix. And each of the verticals is a system. So you can see the transportation, water, food, energy, ICT, all of those verticals. But across the horizontals, these are where you come into a lot of different academic disciplines like marketing and operations. And you were talking, James, about the Tower of Babel. In business and society, when we hire people out of community colleges or higher education or out of high school, the biggest thing they have to learn is how to talk to each other. Because they don't have this, it's like a Tower of Babel. They've got different languages. Even if they've been, if they know a lot about marketing, if they're a marketing student, they know a lot about marketing, but they don't know about necessarily psychology. This framework right here, though, covers the kinds of communications that people have to learn. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this other than it's a resource and we're working on ways of making it efficient to teach everyone a little bit of the communication skills across this whole space. When we hire people, oftentimes what we discover is, it might be a great systems engineering student, but then all they can do is talk about the system engineering part of the system. Or maybe they're a good economics and law, computer science, marketing design, and it's just like the blindfolded people feeling the different parts of the elephant. They're great at talking about the ear if they've studied ears or the trunk, but to solve real-world problems do not respect discipline boundaries. Real-world problems just don't respect them. So the people working on these teams have to learn how to communicate, and that's typically what people have been learning in industry and on the job. But we in industry, we're trying to solve problems faster and faster, and you're the experts in education. Help us. Help us figure out how to get people to communicate across these disciplines and systems better and faster. So we talk about these different types of systems. Cities are systems that have all these 13 systems. Now this is interesting. Universities, higher education, also have those 13 systems. Think about your community college. You probably have a parking problem, do you? Right? Okay, so there's your transportation. Water, yeah, you got water there. Food comes in, people have to eat, energy, information. So your community college is a miniature city, is a holistic system. So can't you somehow use the fact that you're a holistic system in the community college to teach your students about the operations of all these systems and how ICT can be applied to improve them? Perhaps. I should also mention that luxury hotels have this property of being holistic. Now, why does higher education matter? This is a chart that talks a little bit about GDP of different countries and how many top-ranked universities those countries have. So you see way out there Japan and Germany. China is here in 2009. In 2004, China was here. So China is shooting up in GDP and top-ranked universities. And the question is, where's the US? Where's the US? The US is off the charts. It's like up through the ceiling, way over there. The US actually has 30% of the top universities in the world and about 24% of the GDP of the world. We're off the chart. We have such a huge advantage. And yet, we're racing down this way, and they are racing up this way. If we don't figure out how to create these T-shaped people, I worry about the future of education and the ability of academia and industry to work together to solve these complex problems. We really need your help to reinvent education. So again, I just want to mention that higher education, you do have this little microcosm. So leverage that. There's a great website you can go to look at the statistics over time of the educational impact of universities, higher education in cities. It's increasing over time. And if you look at the information at Urban Age, you can see that more and more people are living in cities. 1900, 10% of the world's population lived in cities. Today it's 50%. What is it, by 2050, it's going to be 75% of the world's population lives in cities. And all of these cities are going to depend on higher education more and more as these little microcosms creating these T-shaped people that can improve all of these different types of systems. And this is just a little graph that shows you the population growth per hour of major cities around the world. If you're not convinced that we have to figure out how to make these systems smarter, because traffic congestion is going to be a bigger problem, clean water is going to be a different problem, and ICT is going to be part of the answer to all of those problems. But we need your help creating these next generation of ICT students that aren't just the type of ICT students that a Google or an Apple or a Microsoft can hire and be happy, but it's the kind of ICT student graduates that any industry can hire to help work on different problems. And you know what? They may be working on water today and transportation tomorrow, and the key thing may be the marketing component of this thing one day and the technology component the other, and they're going to have multiple careers in their lifetime. So we do a disservice if we just create these same narrowly focused students that we created that helped us over the last 50 years. It was great, but it's not what the future needs. Especially when, in 10 years, hello, I need to know what the GDP of every country is plotted against the top universities in that country. I need to see it now. Ah, thank you. It took 2 students 3 months to create that graph I showed you. In 10 years, it'll be as fast as you say it, and it's done. So we won't need these, well, we'll need some of them, but we won't need everybody to be these little narrow, deep, that have plenty of time to communicate. More and more, they're going to be empowered by ICT as ICT users with next generation ICT capabilities. They're going to have to be working on a range of projects over their lifetime in many different systems, communicating with many different disciplines. So let's talk a little bit about what one of the next waves in ICT is public sector. So once you have all these great T-shaped ICT plus students, where do they need to really focus? Well, we have a crisis. Europe has a crisis, countries going bankrupt. US has a crisis, states going bankrupt. There is a real problem here. It's a fiscal problem. But let's just delve into this problem here. Because does anybody disagree that the bankruptcies of countries and states is something you don't worry about? To me, this seems like a big deal. So, and there's other problems we face too. But here's the crux of it. All of these countries are getting better, universities, smarter people, lifestyles, quality of life is going up, but if they lived as inefficiently as we do, we would need 5.4 Earths to sustain us. So we've got to start applying ICT to fix these systems, because these people want a better quality of life, but they can't live the inefficient high quality of life we lead. It's got to be much more efficient, at least 5 times more efficient or 6 times more efficient. This is a chart you've already seen. The world will get smarter because we have to. It's really important that healthcare, weather-related incidents, think about all the, think of all these weather-related incidents, trillions of dollars of damage here and there. I mean, we know about weather. We know about, there's a project right now, we're working with the city of New York, like where do you put the snow plows? Well, we can do micro-analysis of the wind patterns and where the snow's falling, so you can put the snow plows better to get 10% more efficiency in removing the snow. So there's all these little efficiencies that are everywhere in these systems that require better information, better ICT systems to do this. And I like this quote at the bottom: history is a race between education and catastrophe. Every generation says that, but I think our generation, it's really an imperative as the standard of living of people comes up around the world, and we cannot live with the inefficiencies that we have in our current systems. So we need to build this smarter planet that's instrumented, interconnected, and more intelligent. And maybe, given the bankruptcy of these governments, maybe we really have to figure out smarter government as a high priority. These slides will be available, but there's just a huge amount of quotes and books out here that are talking about this. But what we need, I think, in the future of ICT education is, I'm looking for the quote here. This is more about the inefficiencies. There's huge opportunities across the California counties. Here it is. Think global, but act local. This has never been more important, and I think the community college system is incredibly important for creating that local talent that's going to be able to fix these local systems. And I think more and more there's a huge opportunity in the ICT educators in the community college to help prepare this next generation of ICT plus T-shaped students that can help us through these really critical issues. There's still a lot of belief out there. So now let's bring it even more home. So yes, community colleges are going to be important, but community colleges here in California can really lead the way. California is unique, and we face these problems. So we have our laboratory with the problems right here, and California could be the one that shows the way in creating this next generation of T-shaped ICT graduates from community colleges that can fix our local systems to create higher quality of service, higher quality of jobs, and better investment opportunities. Think of all the green retrofitting just from solar and other things like that. Those are the real opportunities that we have right here in our state of California. And by the way, I live here in California. I live down in Santa Clara. And go to work every day in the Almaden Research Center up on a nice mountain in South San Jose. So I would urge you, as you're thinking about the future of ICT education, to broaden the aperture a bit, look at these local problems, think about student projects where they learn some technical skills but can go out and apply it in improving these local systems that are in such need of improvement. I want to thank my colleague Mark Dixon, who created a lot of these slides about smarter government. He actually works with a lot of the California government county officials in thinking about how to build a smarter California. But every time I talk to him, he says, and we have to have this next generation of ICT students coming out. This is going to be critical to the success. He's got more confidence that we're going to be able to build the technology that you can talk to that'll answer the questions, and that we'll be able to change our curriculum and our courses and our material to create the types of students that will be required to do this. So let's go prove him wrong. Next Monday, when you're back in the classroom or whenever it is, see, maybe this is a topic for discussion at this conference. See how you can do the smallest changes to what you're already doing that move it in this direction. A lot of small changes will get us going, I think, in the right direction. So thank you, and I think I still have a little bit of time for questions. It's about 10 o'clock, and I think the hook comes out at 10:10 or so. 10:05. So I'm hoping there's some questions or comments or arguments if people see it differently. Yes?
Yeah, my students complain that the hiring companies are looking for very deep, specific skills. I want to see Windows, I want to see Linux, I want to see Cisco, and they're intimidated. The companies are not asking for the people you described. When it comes down to hiring, they're asking for the deep silo kinds of.
I don't know who you're talking to because the survey of those 600 included these.
The hiring departments, the people who put out the ads and the interviews. My guys go and they say, they ask me 5 zillion questions, very detailed.
Yeah, that's true. And so let's talk about that because.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was his students are coming back to him saying that they're not deep enough, that the hirers want that depth. And you're right, we want depth and breadth.
So they're not asking for the breadth. And the very intimidated because
well, the 600 in your survey are asking for it. You're saying the hiring departments aren't.
Exactly. The message that you're seeing on top is not going down to the hiring manager. And they're sending in techies to interview my guys. And they're saying, gee, you don't know this little bit about the operating system, you're not eligible.
Okay.
So it's a two-way street. I mean, we're trying to satisfy what our students are seeing, which is different from what you're saying the employers are looking for.
Right, so there's different parts of organizations that have different descriptions on what they're working, and the people who are actually out there just quizzing the students aren't quizzing them about the breadth, they're just quizzing them about where the bits go. Okay. That's work we have to do on the HR side. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Just alter an alternate perspective. I teach e-gaming in a college back east, and they can get 1,000 technically proficient students who know how to operate Unity and the various gaming engines. What they're looking for is someone who can talk to a client, who can think logically. That's
what I'm seeing. That's what I'm hearing too.
But, we're a small college out east, but that message is loud and clear among us. That they have to be able to use those skills. They can't just have them.
Right.
The era of the work in your basement with a Jolt Cola and your mom upstairs is long gone.
Yeah, but I think you've got a good point too, though, that there's more communication that needs to be done to the people actually out there doing the quizzes in HR. Yes?
Yeah, a few of the integration to the energy sector, we talked about the smart grid, and I guess Cisco's been quoted as saying that the smart grid and the energy sector is going to be larger than the internet itself, and they're already gearing up for that.
I've heard similar things, yeah. That's really interesting. This may be a little bit of a tangent, but it's in that top part of your pyramid on the ICT research. The fact of the matter is, in 2017, we will be able to build supercomputers that have the statistical properties of being able to simulate all of the neural firings in a human brain by 2017. That doesn't mean it'll be thinking. 2017, though, statistically we'll be able to model something as complex as a human brain and all of the stuff going, at least the neural firings in it. The power required to run that supercomputer will be the power needed to run a whole city. So don't worry about these robots taking over anytime soon because they couldn't carry the batteries needed. But just think about that, the opportunity that creates. Because if we can figure out, when I touch my head, I'm doing supercomputing calculations equivalent right now, I don't burn my finger. You stick it inside a supercomputer, Blue Gene, it melts. So we have to figure out in the ICT community, the research part up here, how to get computers that use 10,000 times less energy doing what systems do today. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the ICT research side is is to figure out that lower energy computation. Bit of a tangent, but you're right. Energy is a huge issue in these future systems. Huge, huge issue.
We have a question.
Okay.
It says here, the speaker showed a slide that identified teamwork, problem solving, etc. as important. How important relative to technical knowledge?
Well, it's the T.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, how relatively important is the teamwork and social skills relative to the technical depth? And the answer is, I'm pushing it on you, the educators. You have to find a way to give us both. If you don't figure it out, some country will. And that's the country that will be creating the people who can innovate best. We have to figure out how to do both. Let me give you a little story. I took typing in high school. Typing 1 when I was a sophomore and typing 2 when I was a junior. It took me 2 years to learn how to type 60 words a minute. I'm sure a lot of you have kids or grandkids who never took a typing lesson and type much, much faster with their thumbs than we type. So we know if you have a keyboard in every room of your house and your kids are watching you type, they can learn things in a fraction of the time it does through this kind of instruction where it's, you know, the only place there's a keyboard is in that classroom in my high school. I go, I touch the keyboard and I learn. No, we have to figure out how to do both. It's not a question of, you know, oh, cut back on the technical 10%, increase this. No, both. Got to have both. 100%. That's your challenge. We got to figure it out. We can make all these other systems better. And people say, well, but the human brain, you know, you can only learn so much. I just gave you an example where radical improvements in learning are possible if you can design the right environment and context for learning. We know that's true. We're not doing optimal learning in any sense on all of these special areas. Just the capstone experience. I try to do as many capstone projects as I can with local students because I know how important it is in their career, because I'll write them a good reference if they do a good capstone project. Those students that come in are nervous about a team project. The time they go out, you know, just wandering the halls of IBM, talking to senior scientists, their confidence levels go way up. They actually learn, oh, you don't try to solve the technical problem in isolation. Try to solve it with all the people. You listen as much as you talk. All of those skills, it's possible if they get that real experience to learn it much more quickly than if I'm an instructor saying, listen as much as you talk. You know, that's not the way to learn that. There's ways to learn this stuff. We just built a game at IBM called City One. Urban planning, I guess, is going to be one of the top jobs in 2011 in the US. And City One, you're thinking about an urban planner. You get to make choices and stuff like this. So we know some of these new learning environments are going to be a way to do this stuff. Real world experiences, especially if industry is willing to meet you halfway. There's ways we can do both. So I'm not gonna compromise. This is no compromise. We need both, all of it. And we're not there. But we need your help to get there. Yes, there's a question over here.
I buy this skills goal that you have up there.
Yeah.
But I think my experience is there's an abilities goal that's most important in terms of helping students be agile, in terms of retraining themselves.
Yes.
And also be problem solvers.
Excellent.
If they can have those two skills,
yes,
then I think we prepare them to be T-shaped people.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So let me go back to this. Yeah, the question was, he sees the ability gap, which is this ability to learn rapidly. And this is one of the reasons why we talk about, where is it here? Yeah, this ugly thing. If you can give students the advanced organizers so that they actually know a little bit about what marketing people talk about and the kinds of problems they solve and the kind of tools, even if they can't do it. If they've worked on teams where they've seen a marketing person apply that tool and the result, then if they actually have to go deeper into marketing at some point in their career, they've got the advanced organizers to do it. So I really do believe that if we had something like those Sims games where you got to try out every single career. I think Whole Foods does this. When they hire somebody at Whole Foods, they make them do every single job in the store before they settle onto a job. And Toyota used to do this too. When you were hired on at Toyota, they made you work like 30 different jobs across every part of Toyota so that when you had to have that conversation with somebody, you knew what they were talking about, you could empathize. So somehow we have to figure out how to solve this problem without compromise, and I think it is getting all those advanced organizers and more general experience earlier. Thanks, that's a good question. Let's see, I've got 2 minutes before I got the hook, I think. Any more? Well, thank you very much.